The killing of George Floyd does more than raise questions about the conduct of the nation's police. Here's Erin Moriarty of 48 Hours.
We've all now seen that disturbing video. A Minneapolis police officer's knee on George Floyd's neck. Which is why there was outrage earlier this month after the preliminary autopsy report seemed to blame Floyd's death mainly on underlying heart problems and potential intoxicants. Floyd's family attorney, Benjamin Crump.
One should not suggest that we didn't see what we saw, and what we saw should be consistent with what the science purports.
The controversy put the national spotlight on the Hennepin County medical examiner whose office did the autopsy. When a person dies under questionable circumstances, it's the medical examiner's job to determine how and why.
We deserve justice.
But George Floyd's family feared that with a police officer involved, politics might override truth. It has happened before.
Motorcycles is what he did every weekend.
When Barbara Stewart's 47-year-old former husband, Daniel Humphreys, died in July 2008, she feared she wasn't getting the full story.
I was told that he had run from the police on his motorcycle and crashed.
The injuries from that crash were minor, so Humphreys' death following that police chase in Central California made no sense to Stewart or their two children.
He had no life-threatening injuries. In fact, he didn't have any broken bones.
It appeared there was more to the case, and the forensic pathologist who did the autopsy, Dr. Bennett Amalu, seemed to agree. But Dr. Amalu was working for Steve Moore, who was not just the San Joaquin County coroner, but also the sheriff. Amalu says without explanation, Moore refused to hand over crime scene reports that could have shown the crash alone didn't cause the death.
I understood why they weren't sharing it, because I think they knew somebody was going to be in trouble.
It took 9 years for the truth to finally be made public. A highway patrol officer had tased Daniel Humphreys 31 times.
Have you ever heard of anyone being tased 31 times?
Stewart believes that's what killed him, and what was called an accident should have been called a homicide. After learning what really happened in Humphrey's case and others, Dr. Amalu quit in 2017 and wrote an angry resignation letter.
He claims the sheriff requests that I modify my autopsy reports.
I felt like he was here for us, because if he wasn't the pathologist that was here, it would have been swept under the carpet, because most of them aren't going to be strong enough to stand up to the Steve Moores.
Sheriff Coroner Moore says it was his job to determine manner of death and denies he interfered in death investigations. But Dr. Amalu's resignation put a spotlight on a national problem. What happened to him may happen to pathologists everywhere.
When we surveyed forensic pathologists, about 82% said that they had been told or pressured at some point by either family members or by supervisors to change their death certificates.
Dr. Judy Melinek is a forensic pathologist based in San Francisco. 82% of pathologists feel pressured, she says, because so much can ride on just 3 words: manner of death, suicide, homicide, accident, or death from natural causes. And when that death occurs at the hands of a police officer, the stakes are especially high.
If you can pressure the pathologist to say, I don't know, I'm not sure, then you may be able to protect that law enforcement officer from prosecution.
It can be risky to just talk about the pressures. The reason Dr. Amalu doesn't appear in this report, he says he has received death threats.
Are you surprised that we've had a hard time getting forensic pathologists to go on camera and talk about the pressure they've been subjected to.
I'm not surprised at all, because remember, this is a very high-profile field, and it's hard to get jobs in this field if you've been in the media and get targeted as a complainer or as someone who causes trouble.
And that may have been what happened to Dr. Thomas Rudd. In 2012, at age 65, pathologist Dr. Rudd ran for election as coroner in Lake County, Illinois, determined to take politics out of death investigations.
When I won the election, my wife looked at me and said, "Do you think you can do the job?" And I said, "Look, if I play it straight and honest, what possibly could go wrong?"
Almost from the beginning, Dr. Rudd stepped on toes, as he did in the case of Lieutenant Joe Glinowitz. In September 2015, the Lake County police lieutenant called in for backup, saying he had seen 3 suspicious men outside a factory. Shortly afterwards, Glinowitz was found dead with a single shot to the chest.
Scores of officers from at least 6 federal and state law enforcement agencies fanned out
We
to
had the FBI, we had ATF, we had Major Crime Task Force, warnings to stay inside, we got a killer on the loose.
But when Rudd's office did an autopsy,
What we found was stunning. Nobody could have got that close to point a gun that way. So how does that happen? Only if he did it himself.
Rudd told investigators that Glinowitz likely committed suicide, and yet the manhunt for the murderers continued, and several suspects were even being held in jail.
People are still being told that Lieutenant Glinowitz was shot by somebody and was a victim.
Correct.
And was a hero cop.
Yes.
When Rudd leaked the truth to reporters, he was accused of damaging the investigation.
Investigators have tirelessly worked day and night.
It took 2 months before officials came clean and acknowledged Lieutenant Glinowitz had taken his own life.
Glinowitz committed the ultimate betrayal.
But instead of an apology, Dr. Rudd soon found himself facing felony charges. When he filed for re-election in 2016, the opposing party hired Bert Odelson, a lawyer, to find a way to get Dr. Rudd off the ballot. Odelson says he found enough small mistakes on Dr. Rudd's election petitions to get him to withdraw from the race.
That's usually the end of the story. Not usually, 99% of the time, it's the end of the story.
But in Dr. Rudd's case, he was charged with 5 felony counts of perjury.
When I heard that Dr. Rudd was indicted, I just couldn't believe it. We have far more egregious cases where no charges are ever brought.
Bert Odelson was so outraged, he switched sides and joined Dr. Rudd's defense team pro bono.
Do you believe that these felony charges were brought in retaliation for the stances he took on these cases?
I truly do.
Dr. Rudd says that to avoid jail, he pleaded guilty to reduced charges in 2018, but he wants to clear his name and has since asked the Illinois governor for a pardon. Back in Minneapolis, the attorneys for George Floyd hired their own forensic pathologists to conduct an independent autopsy, but it may not have been necessary. The medical examiner has issued a final report that now states Floyd's heart attack was caused by law enforcement, restraint, and neck compression. He ruled the death a homicide. His office turned down our request for further explanation. Citizens need truth in these cases, says Dr. Melinek, but without independence, pathologists may not be able to give it.
If your loved one dies in the hands of law enforcement, you want to know that the autopsy was done with integrity. You want to know that you can rely on those findings. That's why it's important. They're rare cases, but they are devastating cases, and they have repercussions for our trust in our institutions.